Do you think that the polarization that has developed over the past 10 years has contributed to this separation? And maybe we can start kind of coming to some, maybe not exactly the 50-yard line, but if we get a little closer, we can kind of reach each other a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think that the challenge is that too many people benefit when when you see these kind of bad actors.
One of the first I had like a political roundtable years ago when Maria Teresa Kumar was first starting Voto Latino, and she came on and she spoke. Malverde was on. This was back 2008 and 2012. So yeah, but I'm originally from Miami.
Miami.
Where are you from?
I grew up in Phoenix.
Phoenix, Arizona?
Yeah,
Not the other Phoenix, obviously.
Yeah, that one. But yeah, I used to live in the South Bay of LA.
Oh, nice.
So I lived in San Pedro.
And how did you get involved with Voto Latino?
Well, I started in about a year ago, or just over a year ago. I came from the ACLU, and I was just really excited to help realize the mission of registering 500,000 Latino voters and using the power of our community to beat Donald Trump. So I was very, very proud to be a part of that effort and ultimately exceed our original goal for registration and help flip some critical Senate seats in places like Colorado and Arizona and obviously Georgia. So just been super excited to help make all of that stuff a reality.
I want to get to the misinformation stuff that's affecting especially the Spanish language community, but you kind of, you already threw out there some of the things that Voto Latino and other Latinx organizations have helped the Democratic Party get into the position they are now. So I just want to jump ahead to, does the Democratic Party, are they acknowledging the power and the value of our community and how the Latinx community really, put them over the top and worked towards getting them, the seats in Georgia and put them, in position to be able to pass the latest stimulus act? Are they aware of that? Are you hearing? I mean, are you? And I guess what I'm getting at is are they ready to work with our community to really give us more?
Yeah. So I'll answer two ways. One is there is a lot to do for our community, both in terms of like what we would need to do anyways, right? Like overcoming historic injustices, overcoming the impact of COVID and how much it has decimated our community, both from a financial and health standpoint, right? So there's already a gargantuan task there. And there's the twin task of undoing so many of the bad things perpetrated by the Trump administration, right? Who took things that were bad or whatnot and made them worse. So I don't envy the position of the folks who are trying to help this administration find success in these matters, because there's a lot to do. But that being said, we've actually been very excited at the approach that the administration has taken. With the confirmation yesterday of Secretary Becerra, there are now 4 Latino cabinet secretaries, which is the first time that's ever happened. So in addition to having the first female and first person of color as a vice president, we also have Latinos represented in meaningful roles in the cabinet and on issues that are hugely important to our community, right? Education, healthcare, etc. So we're talking about, and actually I'll be small business administration is one of them, right? So like the different things that I was just talking about, the impact on our community, the leadership of our community is part of that work. And this is coming off of a Democratic Party that was led by Tom Perez, right? Former U.S. Labor Secretary, also Latino.
Okay, that's actually, I mean, those are, because sometimes, a lot of times I ask, like, what are we getting, aside from lip service? That actually, for me, representation at the leadership position counts. So I want to acknowledge that, the administration has definitely come through and putting Latinos in cabinet positions. And I'm glad to hear that we're represented in the Small Business Administration, because I'm gonna lead into like the next question about going forward. Obviously, I understand how the past 4 years, the priority was to take out an administration that had a lot of anti-Latinx, anti-immigration, anti-Hispanic rhetoric, that definitely enabled a lot of attitudes that we've been working towards eradicating for the past, half a century.
Right.
Now that's, and not to say that that's disappeared, but now moving forward,
No.
for me, I really hope that our community and some of the organizations like Voto Latino that have a lot of influence on the Democratic Party start asking for not just lip service, not just for some of the humanitarian protections that we should be getting automatically, but economic help and help in education. Our community needs investment, and our community needs better schools.
Yep.
So it's not just, for me, not just fighting against, the racists. I get that's a problem, but also going towards the people that are supposedly on our side and asking for more.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that the administration has already done, what I might call a down payment on that effort, is the work in the American Rescue Plan. In particular, I would highlight the various measures that are designed to help children come out of poverty. I mean, our community is essentially the youngest demographic, right? Well, we might not be the youngest, but we're very young, right? The average age of a Latino is like 19, whereas for Anglos, it's like 56 or something. It's like, there's a big difference in the age. And part of that is because our community, we have more children, we have more young people. And so the impact on our community from some of the economic protections in the rescue plan, I think, are very significant. Some of those things include money for public education to go back to the states, right, who have been decimated by the loss in tax revenue. And as we've experienced, right, when states lose revenue, the first places that get hit are communities of color. So seeing the efforts of the administration to try to fill that gap through other means, it's a step in the right direction. And of course, the fact that while imperfect, right, that this particular form of stimulus is designed to include some undocumented folks, as opposed to the CARES Act and the previous iterations that were designed explicitly to leave out undocumented folks and even mixed status families. So in this plan, if you have an ITIN or a social security number, you will qualify for that support, which is a change from the previous versions. So look, like, there's a lot to do, and there's more that we expect from our elected leaders, but we're seeing movements in the right directions and some of those critical investments that are designed to not just help our economy on the whole, but also to help people of color who are the most impacted by the inequities that have been exposed even more openly by COVID.
Tell me a little bit about how misinformation targets our community, especially the Spanish language speakers.
Yeah, so misinformation is a big problem. I mean, it's something that, and I'll be clear, in politics, right? There's a lot of people who say things, they make arguments, they make their case, right? And that's different than what we're seeing with disinformation, right? The difference between a debate, an argument, even a personal attack, right? Some of those things are based on facts or, an understanding or a disagreement on an issue. Disinformation is this idea where folks will be served up falsehoods that look like they're true because they contain manipulated images or a person who appears to be trustworthy but is saying something that is false. And the reason why that's such a challenge in our community is that when you have folks who are navigating sort of America, the United States, from either from a different language, right, because they're Spanish dominant or Spanish only speaking, or they're recent immigrants, right? So even if they do speak English, they're new to the country, new to the rules, the difference between state and local governments, and kind of any of these other distinguishing factors, because it's not the same, right, as other countries. There's a vulnerability there, right? It's not simply that that the information is provided in somebody's original language, it's also preying on the fact that you may have a middle-aged person who is voting for the first time. And so they don't have any experience with voting in the United States. They only remember what voting was like in their own country. And even if they research it and they're trying to learn, they're also getting information, as is the case in my family, from the WhatsApp groups, right? The different family chat threads, right? Where the chisme and all the other stuff is there, right? In my own family, I'm on the chat thread with my family in Guadalajara, and it's like 20% prayer memes, 60% anti-AMLO stuff, and birthday greetings on everything else, right? So in my case, right, like I'm not getting a lot of political information from them, and I have other places to get that information. But there are bad actors out there, sometimes even ones that are influenced by foreign governments, that put information that is incorrect and designed to confuse or designed to get people to do the wrong thing, and sharing it in these WhatsApp groups that have thousands of people. And the examples, there are different examples of like a picture of Joe Biden and Maduro in an embrace, and some subtext that says something about why why Maduro is bad and Biden is bad. Don't vote for Biden, you'll get the same thing you got with Maduro. But that's just the political stuff. The stuff that we're focused on right now, and the thing that we think has the biggest potential negative impact for our community, because the election is done for now, right? Like that's the 2020 problem. Our 2021 problem is that there are still people in our community who are getting false information about COVID. Why they shouldn't get the vaccine, that the vaccine is untested or unsafe, or if you take the one that has one dose instead of two, you're more likely to whatever, right? Like just stuff that is either not true or sort of true by by half. That's something false sandwiched between two things that are true, that are designed to confuse people. The consequences of this are a big problem, right? If you're a person who is still navigating our country and our culture here, right? And your first interaction with public service is the COVID vaccine, and you're given false information about it, and you don't take it and get sick, or you do, you change your behavior because of the information that you got. That's the first step in decreasing your confidence in the whole thing, right? Because that's the their first step, their first experience with engaging in civic life. The consequences of that are more complicated over the long term, right? If you don't like voting and you choose not to participate because you're suspicious, then you're excluding yourself from the opportunity to engage in our civic life. For Latinos, that's hugely significant, right? We ran a big campaign last year to get our community to take the census, because if we're not counted, we don't get resources. We register and turn out Latino voters because when we vote, we influence the outcome of these things, whether it's on the state, local, federal level. And those things pay off in terms of how political people treat us, right? Whether it's a rescue plan that includes undocumented folks who have ITIN numbers, or non-citizens, I should say, who have other methods to file their taxes, or the previous administration, right, which actively worked against us. There's an example that came up on misinformation and radicalization, that there was a person who initially got false information about COVID and was taking in the fake information about COVID, and that led to that person pursuing other radical information, and ultimately was at the Capitol during the insurrection. I think it was Ronan Farrow who did a story about this, about a woman who wasn't had some vaccine hesitancy, which is normal, right? Like people always are uncomfortable with a vaccine when it's new, like that's well documented, and the CDC and the other folks is part of the reason why everyone is doing such a big campaign to encourage folks to participate. But this was a person who was looking for other information and found some other false content, and ultimately went down a rabbit hole and became radicalized.
So can I propose this question? I wonder if because not just our media, but our social media, and even sometimes now our social groups are so polarized that if you get somebody that ventures off to one side, they almost lose complete connection or at least trust with the other. So when we're losing a little bit of the coming to the middle a little bit, and so sometimes you lose somebody completely to the other side. Do you think that the polarization that has developed over the past 10 years has contributed to this separation? And maybe we can start kind of coming to some, maybe not exactly the 50-yard line, but if we get a little closer, we can kind of reach each other a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think that the challenge is that too many people benefit when when you see these kind of bad actors, right? I mean, we're not running against President Trump anymore, but President Trump perpetuated disinformation from the seat of the presidency, right? So when the leader of the free world was telling people in Georgia that maybe they should vote twice, right? Like that changes the dynamic, right? This is not, like I was saying before, this is not just a simple matter of a political disagreement. This is a person who is in a position of authority and holds an extraordinary amount of respect in the office, that when we experience some of these things, it's like, how do you respond to that?
Well, can I just say, if you'd probably be able to reach some of the other people on the other side. I'm going to get to just a challenging question that I've been wanting to ask for a couple of years now
Sure.
of you guys, and is this, because I understand why our community and all the political organizations around our community had to mobilize and prioritize and focus their energy on removing an administration, the past administration that had, a rhetoric, a mentality, and immigration policy that was the antithesis to our interests. I get that. But now moving forward, is Voto Latino a partisan organization? Because when you guys started, I remember asking, and it wasn't, and there was actually Latino Republicans that were involved in your organization. So post-Trump era, is Voto Latino a partisan, affiliation of the Democratic Party, or does it leave room open to accept maybe, some of the Mexican Americans in Southern California and Texas, and some of the Venezuelans and Cubans in Florida, who are not bad people, but they might end up on the other side and not here?
Yeah. So I will, sort of.
I know that's a big one. I gave you.
Well, no, it's really not. I mean, the first thing I'll say is that formally, right, Voto Latino is a 501c4, which is a nonprofit organization that is not affiliated with political parties. And the Voto Latino Foundation is a 501c3, which is a charitable organization that is formally nonpartisan, right? So our efforts to register voters, which is the greatest volume of our work, is done primarily in a non candidate related fashion. For the first time in the 16-year now history of Voto Latino endorsed a presidential candidate from the C4 arm, which is legally allowed to do. And the reason was not to be a backing block for the Democratic Party. It was because Donald Trump had essentially forced the question for so many in our community, right? Like, in order for us to foster civic life and do the work of creating opportunities for engagement for Latinos to come into civic life, whether it's through registering to vote, to do census participation, right, through our leadership efforts with things like the Power Summit and other things, right? Like, those are not done with a partisan lens. Those are done when the interest in developing civic life and political engagement in our community. Now, that also means that people like AOC went through some of those trainings and stuff, right? Like, there are certain aspects of the of how civic life is playing out for Latinos that has caused so many in our community to come to the Democratic Party, but that's not the mission at VL. The mission is to build greater civic engagement in our community broadly, which means that engaging with people like Ted Cruz. But then when Ted Cruz shows up and says we're going to try to invalidate the outcome of the election, right? Like, it's not just it's not a Democrat or Republican thing. I mean, we're talking about the will of millions of Latinos all over the country who voted a certain way, and then it becomes about, well, what did our community fight for? What did our community ultimately come down on the side of?
And I understand that, but I think I'm going more towards the whole reaching people who are subject to misinformation and radicalization. As a progressive liberal centrist person who kind of tries, especially the last couple of years, trying to look down the road and seeing how we can kind of come together a little bit more as a community, as a Latinx community, and then as a country as a whole. I feel that we need to start reaching across the aisle, not to compromise our values, but to start a conversation. Because we haven't had a conversation. We have two separate conversations going on in this country. And that's why I feel some people end up, falling victim to, misinformation. And because I think that, let's just take a hypothetical Republican, Latino, middle of the country, didn't like Trump, but kind of, falls in line with some things. Let's just pretend this hypothetical person is easily manipulated, right? For lack of a better term. If they feel that a lot of the Latino organizations are hyper partisan, they'll just shut them out. So they won't get your message. Where if you start kind of coming to some more a safe space for a difficult conversation, and allow people from all parts of the political spectrum, at least in our community, to come together and have a talk and agree that we don't have to come out of that conversation all agreeing. I think it can start that pathway, and then someone who is falling for some misinformation, radicalization is within reach, and we can kind of bring them in, and they won't distrust us so much, because they won't just assume that we have one way of looking at things and we completely, try to invalidate everything that, I'm saying? I'm kind of thinking towards the future of how we can kind of all just kind of come together a little bit.
Yeah, no, I feel you, Humberto. I want to make a point on this disinformation piece, which is, I don't think it's a question of whether or not people are easily manipulated, right? Like, I when I was characterizing the folks who are more susceptible to disinformation, right? Like, it's a combination of, new to the environment or the country and language access, and that being the beginning of someone's experience with civic life or civic engagement, and the consequences of that being their first experience, right? Like, I don't think that people who, people make their own decisions about who to vote for. They have, they can make whatever evaluation they want. The challenge from this disinformation piece is it takes out that good faith dialogue that you're describing, and subjects it to a manipulation that's, we think being funded by foreign governments who are adversaries of the United States and want to sow discord so that, so that our populace is less cohesive, right?
To play devil's advocate, just because and you've been very fair with me, kind of, playing the challenger here. Are we susceptible to misinformation ever coming from foreign governments that funnel it in through, maybe, the left side of social media, that kind of thing? I mean, does it?
Well, I
understand that it could. It's more pervasive with some of the right wing stuff. Get it? But are we also kind of like on the lookout? Are we ever getting? I use the word manipulated because people don't. I use the word manipulated in the way that, like, the Republicans try to manipulate Venezuelans and Cubans into thinking the Democratic Party is going to turn the country into a communist state, right? To me, that's manipulation, because they know what they know the emotion. So, are we also aware of being misinformed on the progressive side sometimes?
Well, I mean, as far as the effort that we're running, like this Latino Anti-Disinformation Lab, we're looking at it from all sides, right? We're doing some testing right now, right? This big effort around COVID. Like, we're not exclusively trying to figure out, what Democrats or Republicans are doing here. Like, we're trying to figure out how this is impacting Latinos broadly. So the issue is more complicated than, what political party a person happens to be a part of. But also to this point about the difference between whatever Democrats creating socialism or something like that. Like, look, I think there's a fair debate to be had about what's going to happen with an expansion of social protections and how that compares to somebody's experience in a Latin American Bolivarian regime of some kind, right? Like, let's have that debate. Like, let's have that conversation, because ultimately I think that's what this is all about, right? Like, if you're a person who left Cuba or you left Venezuela or whatever, and you say, I don't want anything that looks like this in my country, like, it's everyone's right to have that kind of conversation. I think the challenge here is when you have folks that say, and now the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to show you a picture of Barack Obama smoking a cigar with Fidel Castro or whatever, and I'm gonna show you this fake picture.
Because I feel that's
Yeah.
I feel it's manipulative to my community specifically when they do that, and so
Yeah.
It's the antithesis of a conversation or a debate. I wish we had debates. I think people, I don't know if social media has a lot to do with this, but it's made our attention span so small that a debate is not something. Maybe there's a few of us that can listen to podcasts and read books and actually read the article and not the headline, but there's a lot of us that don't and would react more. Their politics are based on memes, headlines, hearsay. So look, thank you for and I'm really happy with some of the things that I'm hearing, and I'm a person that's always looking towards the future, although I try to study the past a lot. I actually need to learn to be more present, but that's a spiritual conversation, not a political one. Just going out, are there any candidates that Voto Latino is because I feel that Voto Latino should be free to get behind, Latino political candidates. I've often said that maybe Latinos should start their own political party, but I mean, maybe that sounds crazy to people. But are there like candidates that you guys are looking towards 2022 and 2024 that could do a lot for our community and represent us at the highest levels of government?
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of remains to be seen with one or two of these potentially open Senate races around the country, to see who's ultimately going to throw their hat in. There are two Latinos running for lieutenant governor in Virginia right now. In the Democratic primary. I think that's really exciting. Oftentimes our community, right, it's like, who's going to be the Latino candidate? And it's like, why not more than one? Why not demonstrate that our community is sufficiently diverse and has a deep bench of people who could take on leadership roles, to take this stuff on. I think there's a lot of opportunity in state legislatures right now. Redistricting is going to change the game for a bunch of folks in many states where Latinos are going to play a big role. You look at places like Texas and Arizona, where there's going to be new congressional seats and there's going to be rewriting of the various congressional districts. Florida should also have some expansion. In the same way, when you see some of the states with shrinking populations, that there's going to be more contention, but I mean, I think oftentimes people don't want to have intra or inter-family fights, right? Where you have a tough primary, but that's where a lot of these, these big things come out. I mean, a lot of people are excited about AOC. I mean, AOC came out of a Democratic primary in a safe Democratic district.
Right.
And so, I do think that there's an opportunity for Latinos around the country, both to show up in some of these new seats and new opportunities that are going to happen because of redistricting, but also as we continue to, take hold of our political power, show up in some of these contests with folks that have been around for a while.
And you know what? Just lastly, going forward, it'd be great if Voto Latino reached out to Latinos in the Republican House and Senate. Maybe Ted Cruz is far-fetched, so maybe you just leave him out of it. But all the other ones, there's Mike Garcia in California, Marco Rubio, and just get them to sit down on the table and say, look, we get that you guys don't like to pay taxes, but can we get you on board with immigration policy? Because you're either an immigrant or the sons and daughters of immigrants. So and kind of like maybe shame them a little bit and create a connection, and maybe they will be the Republican in that room that stands up and says, I can't stand by this.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see that happen, especially with Senator Senator Rubio, right? Who's up. I think.
I mean, sometimes he says that he wants to listen, but I don't know that ends up playing out in the policies he votes for. But
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I want to say I think Senator Rubio was in the if he wasn't in the Gang of Eight, he was in the working group on immigration. I want to say 2 or 3 instances ago in the Senate. So I do think that there's opportunity for dialogue. And look, like this country is not made up of a single party, right? Like it's made up of people who don't vote and people who are not engaged in the political process, right? We live in a republic. We entrust all these folks to, govern, in our broadest interests. So I do hope for dialogue. I mean, on immigration, President Biden has put out a marker on a comprehensive plan that would include a path to citizenship for 11 million undocumented folks.
It's holding
formalization of the DREAM Act, et cetera. And, whether we get it in pieces or we get it all the way whole, there seems to be an appetite to get some movement on many of these things, whether it's a permanent opportunity for dreamers, some of the protections for refugees and the status for folks from places like Haiti and Venezuela. So I do think there's room. I do think there's opportunities for bipartisanship. The other side has to, step forward and make it happen. But I do think that our community is helping push that around the country.
Well, the fact that you guys say that you're open for dialogue is a good step towards that. Look, thanks a lot for talking to me today.
Of course.
Answering some of these challenging questions that I have, and look forward to what else is to come and what Voto Latino's role is going to play out in the next few years. So thanks a lot, Danny.